Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Day Room. And it's still spooky season. Since Halloween is on Tuesday, tonight we are going to be talking about three of the more well-known movie monsters in cinematic history. Specifically the archetypes, because we're not going to necessarily dig into any specific movie. But tonight we are talking about the Mummy, the Wolfman, and the Vampire. So, joining me on tonight's misadventure, we have Tommy D.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you all.
And the Squirrel Lord himself, MGTOW Outlaw.
Hello.
So, gents, how are you all this evening?
Oh, I am great. How about
Passable at best.
you?
So, guys, when you think of the old school monster movies, do you have any particular favorites that come to mind?
Myself personally, not really. Though I do lean towards the vampires. I think one of my favorite renditions was Lost Boys.
Yeah.
Great soundtrack, good lore, decent plot, shitty dialogue, which made it fun.
Yeah.
What about you, Outlaw?
Yeah, I'd say out of the ones we're going to talk about tonight, the classic Dracula, probably. You know, I like the different iterations that our pop culture has put on the Dracula caricature over the years, you know, with Sesame Street, Scooby Doo, all the cartoons and movies. It's very interesting.
Okay. And you guys will have to forgive my furry little co-star this evening. She decided that tonight my lap is exactly where she needs to be. So, before we jump into the main event, first of all, everything that we're going to be talking about, I found a wiki that covers this. So we're going to read from that. We're going to discuss, same as my usual format. And then if we still have time at the end of the three that we plan to talk about, we're going to go ahead and just go into there and see about picking out other monsters and folklorish creatures.
Heck yeah.
Sounds good.
What we're going to start with is something that technically is not one of the monster movie monsters that we normally were planning to look at, but it fits two of them, so it's getting brought in. This is just the generic, the undead. Sorry about that.
The corpse that has been beaten to death.
I should have done that earlier. Sorry. But the undead are beings from mythology, legend, or fiction that are deceased but behave as though they were still alive. And not to be mistaken for members of Congress.
Who are truly undead.
Oh, yeah.
The undead may be incorporeal like ghosts, or corporeal like vampires and zombies and mummies. Okay, now, interesting tidbit, Bram Stoker wanted to use the title undead for his novel Dracula, but he instead used the term to describe vampires in general rather than the title character. But there is a quote here that I am going to read verbatim. This is from the novel Dracula, from the vampire hunter Van Helsing. Before we go do anything, excuse me, let me tell you this. There is out of the lore and experience of the ancients and of all those who have studied the powers of the undead. When they become such, there comes with the change the curse of immortality. They cannot die, but they must go on, and age after age, adding new victims and multiplying the evils of the world. For all that die from the preying of the undead become themselves undead and prey on their kind. And prey on their kind. And so the circle goes on, ever widening, like the ripples from a stone thrown into the water. But the most blessed of all with this, when this now undead be made to rest as the true dead. Excuse me. When the soul of the poor lady whom we love shall again be free, instead of working the wickedness by night and growing more debased in the assimilating of it by day, she shall take her place with the other angels. So that, my friend, it will be a blessed hand for her that shall strike the blow that sets her free. Van Helsing, Dr. Seward's Diary, 29 September, Dracula, Chapter 16. Which, if you have not had the opportunity to actually read that novel, go and do it. It is orders of magnitude better than the book, or than the movie. Any of the Dracula movies that have been made to date.
Yeah, that is one I have not read yet. Mostly because I just have never found a copy of it or wanted to look for a copy at the time.
Oh, it is a very good one. I found a copy of it in a post library years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good night. Me and dinner are not getting along tonight. Sorry about all that, gentlemen. Okay, we've got a couple interesting chats here. Got Slick South here. And I do agree with you. That is a classic movie. Pretty much any of the anything from before 1950, I think, was probably one of the better movies they made.
Absolutely. Strange.
And yeah, St. Louis Arch, The Strain was a good one.
Yeah, that one I'm not familiar with.
And Vampires in the New Future, Us. I can't entirely agree with you, but I get where you're going. Okay, assuming I can avoid breaking something else, we're going to move on to our actual first real target critter for the night. That's not the right one. We are talking about the mummy to start with. Mummies are creatures inspired from the funerary practices of Egyptian mythology and are deceased pharaohs. The reanimated mummy monster concept first originated in a story from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, lot number 249 in 1892. The English word mummy is derived from a medieval Latin word mumia, a borrowing of the medieval Arabic word mamaya, and from a Persian word, mum, which meant an embalmed corpse, as well as the bituminous embalming substance, also meant bitumen. The medieval English term mummy was defined as a medical preparation of the substance of mummies, rather than the entire corpse. With Richard Hakluyt in 1599 AD complaining that these dead bodies are the mummy which the Physicians and apothecaries do against our wiles make us swallow. These substances were defined as mumia. I'm not going to read the Oxford English Dictionary part of it. You guys can find this on the Myths and Folklore wiki.
Okay.
According to myth and legend, when a pharaoh or other royal member died, they had their organs, rarely including the heart, amusingly enough, removed and preserved separately. Later, the body would be salted and preserved. Then they were wrapped and decorated. In some stories, the mummy needed to be made properly to enjoy the afterlife. Mummies are often viewed as humans wrapped up in a type of gauze. Mummies, despite their frail appearance, are said to be very strong. Sometimes they can even place a curse on any intruder who disturbs them. And their biggest weakness is fire.
Mm.
As a monster, the concept first appeared in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's story from the 1890s. And before that, they did appear in fiction, but not as a horror monster. Raphael McGregor wrote in the Conan Doyle Weird Book that Lot number 249 is one of the most significant stories of the history of the supernatural fiction, being the first to depict reanimated mummies as sinister, dangerous creatures. So Arthur Conan Doyle is best known for creating the character Sherlock Holmes, as well as writing the influential novel The Lost World. Now, we all know mummies from different horror movies, specifically the ones that are self-titled by that name. Do you guys actually know the origin of the mummy myths?
I can't say that I do right offhand.
Tommy, do
No.
you have a guess?
No, but I'm sure it has something to do with burial from Egypt.
It does. And it's not actually specifically Egyptian. Here's the interesting thing. In most ancient cultures, they were polytheistic. And they had very interesting ideas on what the afterlife was going to look like based on what your status in physical life was. So in theory, if you were a slave or a servant in the physical realm, you would be a slave or servant in the afterlife for the same individual that you served in your physical life.
Right, because you were bound to them.
Now, in Egypt, there were frequently cases where close house servants would be mummified alongside their pharaohs, or even, ironically enough, their high priests. There were a small number of cases where spouses would be mummified alongside the pharaoh and the priest that was the primary individual being embalmed and mummified.
Now,
Now,
it's
go
ahead.
Go on.
No, I was just going to say it's very interesting, when you think about these creatures, the idea of immortality comes up. It reminds me almost of like the zombies in a sense. When we're talking about the mummies.
That's actually a very similar thing to a certain extent. Okay, zombies, in the traditional folkloric sense, are typically are mindless undead that are brought back to life to serve someone who is frequently a dark, evil wizard or priest, to act as a servant or something akin to a shock troop.
Yep.
Only in relatively recent times have you been seeing ideas of a quote-unquote zombie apocalypse come up. Because zombies used to just be seen as one-off creatures that, in theory, would be indistinguishable from a normal human until you got close enough to see that they were not drawing breath and detect the odor of decay coming from them.
They were almost like a golem.
An yes
animated, created object.
Again, yes and no. A golem could technically be any kind of construct that would be given life and forced to do the will of another person, another entity.
Right.
Now, the mummy differs from the zombie
Mm-hmm.
in a very key way.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is a willful entity.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I hate the movie, not Ben Affleck, those newer mummy movies that had that one real goofball guy, I can't remember his name
Oh,
now.
Brendan Fraser.
Brandon
That guy.
Fraser.
Yeah, Brandon Fraser.
Until, or one of the things that that movie did really good with the mummy from that,
Mm-hmm.
he was shown as being intelligent, able to make decisions, and able to influence the living and the dead.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was a malevolent spirit that had been reanimated in his body. He had tried to do this himself, but was thwarted in that storyline until somebody come
Something
along
like
and
that,
raised
yeah.
him. Yeah.
See, you could, I would, in my opinion, narrow it down to a romanticization of the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
Was where I would say part of the mummy legend come from.
You
You know,
were,
the Roman.
I'm going to say you were directly on the mark when it comes to the modern interpretation of it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. You know,
Now,
these people in ancient Egypt, you know, I'm sure they always wondered what was the afterlife going to be, and that was such a strong desire to know what was beyond the afterlife that's where the imagination came from. You know, throughout the centuries, people's different interpretations of taking the idea and running with it gave us some of
well,
the best.
the other thing with mummies that you got to remember is, and this is why I think the older movies are better than the newer ones in many cases, because they're
Mhm.
paying more attention to the original source material, not just trying to reinvent what was done before them.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Early mummy movies actually looked, and granted they kind of half-assed it, they looked at the folklore of the region that they were basing their stories off of.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
So,
tried to include it in the story. Yeah.
one thing
Okay.
that was common on every Egyptian funeral site was the Pharaoh's curse.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Mhm.
Basically, if you were somebody who was not a member of the royal household and you broke the seal on their tomb and entered, you would be cursed with some form of evil befalling you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I it's been a while since I watched the original movie, but if memory serves, that original Mummy movie had the main monster trying to retrieve some piece of treasure that was stolen from its tomb, and then it would go back to where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
the details from what I remember reading might be fuzzy, so you guys chime in if I get it wrong. But wasn't it back in the 1920s when they unearthed King Tut's tomb? I think it was the popular myth at the time that it had like some sort of a poison on the tomb or some sort of like a dust that
Yeah.
was poisonous.
Carter's
Uh,
expedition, 1921, I believe.
yeah.
That sounds correct.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I want to say that what ended up happening is they caught some kind of a illness
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
from material that was within that tomb
Yeah.
that caused several people there to die rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, there were a lot of people who had mysterious accidents after the event,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
which the locals took as proof that the Pharaoh's curse was real
Yeah.
Yep.
and that anyone who was seen working with them was doomed to face the wrath of the Pharaoh.
Yep.
Right. Well, and this was good advertisement to get more money to continue the exploration of the tomb network.
Which is funny
Mm-hmm.
that you say that. The person that actually cracked the seal on Tutankhamun's tomb,
Mm-hmm.
he actually died of relatively mysterious circumstances shortly thereafter.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Now, whether it was because of a pharaonic curse or more than likely syphilis,
or a local tropic disease.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, any of
So,
those things,
Mm-hmm.
so you could
irrelevant.
basically say, like, over the generations, and with things like this happening, people's imagination and curiosity grew the mythos of these characters into what we see today. You know, with all of this mystery and curiosity, like we're talking about here with this Tutankhamun. Uh, it's. I think that's where this comes from. You know, people, and like you said a while ago, they pass stories down over several generations, and it's kind of like that game of what is it called? Phone or
Telephone.
telephone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Over the course of several generations, you know, people will add details and add their imagination to it,
And you lose
Yeah,
details at the same
and you
time. Yeah.
lose details. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
in some ways, it's a reverse version of a fisherman's story
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
because every fisherman likes to claim he caught the biggest, most impressive specimen of whatever fish there was.
You guys know
Mm-hmm.
the joke. The fish I caught was this big.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But
Yep.
it's fascinating though. That would be a whole fascinating study in of itself. How the human brain can pass stories down and details of things, and then it change over time
Mm-hmm.
between different people's interpretations. That's pretty interesting.
Well,
Now,
that's folklore and mythological studies. You see
uh-huh.
the differences depending on the era that they were studied in and what they brought to the table with
Mhm.
Now here's the
evidence.
now here's the other part of this that I'm gonna go ahead and touch on for tonight for this,
Mm-hmm.
and we're gonna touch on it a little bit for the others as well. It's not just the Egyptians that had mummies.
No.
Mhm.
Now, disturbing the mummy has different contexts in different regions of the world.
Mhm.
The Mayans had mummification
Mm-hmm.
rituals.
So did the Inca.
The Asians of various areas had mummification rituals.
Yep.
Hmm.
Australian Bushmen had rituals to preserve the corpses of their most well renowned leaders.
Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
The thing is, not all of them saw disturbing the tomb of these ancients as being something that would get you a death penalty.
No.
Mm.
There were
Mhm.
certain ancient Central American tribes that actually carried the corpses of dead leaders with them to war and saw them as the leader of the war party, even though they'd been dead for God only knows how many decades at that point.
Well, you also saw him breaking out the mummies and parading them through the city streets when there was a major celebration event or certain
Mhm. Or when
holidays.
there was a major disaster and they felt that they needed
Yep.
to appease their gods.
Or bring in
Yep.
the ancestors' help. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep. So, but
For sure.
I think we can say we've pretty safely wrapped this one up. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Yeah, we're pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty good take.
I like
Now,
that.
I do have one thing to add to that though, and
Yeah,
this is
fire
kind
away.
of funny. You look at the way that modern cinematic media has portrayed these. One of the things that always struck me that was really quite a good twist was one of the latest Tomb Raider movies, um, where she went and she found her father. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was the last one made, but they broke into an ancient Chinese empress's tomb, and there was all kinds of warnings about it that this empress had sacrificed herself to stop the destruction of the human race. Come to find out, she had an incurable disease that would destroy the earth. That is one of the ones that kind of plays on the mummy's curse.
Yes,
And
it does.
actually, the movie wasn't bad, other than it was completely
Mm.
unrealistic. But
Well, so was a typical
Yeah.
Tomb Raider.
well, yeah, I mean, it followed the Tomb Raider series. Anyway, I just thought I'd put that one out there.
Oh, and actually, I almost forgot to mention this. in case our favorite nearsighted horse avatar streamer ever watches this,
Hmm.
the Norse have a version of the mummy that, depending on who's controlling them, they're either neutral or straight up get the heck out of my or get the heck off my lawn, old man energy.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
The Draugr.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember
If
the
you
name.
guys have ever played Skyrim, you're familiar with this or with the Draugr.
No, I remember the name from other games and mythology, but
Yeah.
I'm
Mhm.
not real familiar with that one.
Draugr are much like mummies in Egyptian mythology,
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
except for one key thing. They don't leave their tombs unless they absolutely have to.
Mm.
Mm.
And only if somebody has gone in and taken something that was of importance to somebody in that tomb.
Yeah.
More like
Yeah.
Tomb
Now, here's the
Guardian.
fucked up thing. Because of the ancient burial rites, anything in that tomb was probably important to somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find it
Because
fascinating. Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
because they would be buried with, in the case of warriors, they'd be buried with their weapons and armor
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
because those were tools they were going to need in the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of important leaders, they would be buried with their weapons, their armor, various accoutrements that they prized highly, and maybe 1 or 2 dozen happily volunteered individuals to join them on their eternal journey.
Voluntold.
You say voluntold, I say volunteered. Either way, they're dead.
The human imagination is so fascinating. You know, to add to the mummy, you know, legends and stuff, how they would adopt in a lot of these cartoons and movies and stuff. If you ever entered into like a pyramid tomb, and you know you had all these booby traps and all that, you know how creative people gets, man. It's it's really fascinating.
Oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
years ago when I was stationed on Fort Campbell, I put together the haunted house for my unit,
Mm-hmm.
and I deliberately themed different parts of it off of various items. One of the rooms was themed off of the interior of an Egyptian tomb.
Hmm.
And before you went in there, if you didn't pay attention, you would not have noticed this, but there was something that was made to look like a tiny cartouche of an Egyptian warning saying, "Do not enter here. This is the home of the dead."
Right.
Wow.
Travel not the paths of the dead, yes, lest ye become one.
It wasn't the exact terminology that was used, but it was something along
No,
those lines.
but it sounds good.
Oh, yeah, it does.
Oh yeah.
Okay, gents. Do we want to go with doggos this time or bloodsuckers on the next one?
Hmm. Or
I'm
do we
giving
want to
you all
flip
the
a
choice
coin?
here.
Let's see. A lot of dog people in the community. Let's do the werewolves.
Oh, I'm
Uh-huh.
sure this one's going to be a howl.
Oh God. All right. With that, I'm gonna go pee. Even worse.
That
I
scared
was
the
actually
piss out
trying,
of you.
I was actually going to hit the button ching, but I hit the wrong button there. Sorry, guys.
That must have
Um,
scared the
in,
piss
in
out of
the
you.
in the chat and with you guys on the stream, are my soundboard effects too loud or just about right?
Ah, they're about right, I would say.
Yeah, they sound pretty good.
All right. Well, Tommy, while you're going to do that, I'm going to go ahead and call up the article for the
Yeah, do
lichens.
it, and I will go wee. Wee.
Yeah,
Um,
it's very
oh,
interesting
oh,
how a lot of these, like I said a while ago, it's very interesting how these originate around, you know, people's celebration of the deceased and what they think about it. Strange how these have connections to that. Like for instance, Halloween, right? We talked about this before. How it's like a pagan festival, supposedly. And correct me if I'm wrong. Which culture is it that celebrates their dead, the Day of the Dead? I think it's Mexican,
I know
right?
the Incas. I know the Mexicans have the Day of the Dead,
Yeah.
but it's pretty much a common thing across multiple cultures.
Hmm.
Oh, dadgummit. I am sharing the wrong screens. Hang on a second, gentlemen. I'll get this fixed here in a second.
Hmm.
Eventually, I'll get better about this. There we go. That's what I wanted up. At least I think it's what I wanted up. Yep, that's what I wanted. Okay, so before I go jumping into the werewolf entry in the website,
Hmm.
I am going to say this. Of all three of the creatures, or monster movie creatures we're talking about tonight, werewolves are probably the second most prevalent in pop culture currently.
Hmm.
They have run the gamut from being the metrosexual bad boy type characters that you see in Twilight to being borderline homicidal savages.
Hmm.
There's a movie titled War Dogs, where it is literally werewolf soldiers.
Hmm.
Well, and don't forget American Werewolf in London by any stretch of the imagination.
Say that again.
Don't forget American Werewolf in London.
Unfortunately, I didn't hear you there, Tommy. Yep.
Okay. Now you're hearing me? No?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay. Don't forget American Werewolf in London, which was completely opposite of what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, American Werewolf in London, it was one guy who was turned into a creature and had
Huh.
no idea how to deal with it.
Yep.
Hmm.
Among other things.
But pop culture has taken werewolves and, in my opinion, twisted them around the axle so badly that you almost need a master's degree in English Lit to figure out where they originated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Every culture on Earth has got some variation on the werewolf myth.
Yep.
The Native Americans actually have a couple different variations because they have things called skinwalkers, which these are evil magic users who have to kill something and wear the skin to become that something.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And then there's what's known as shifters who can naturally do this.
Well, and don't forget the Dogmen.
Hmm.
Pop had a good episode on that one.
Yeah, I did say that there's a lot of variations.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
A lot of variations. We could actually turn werewolf mythology into a stream of its own.
Oh, easily.
Oh yeah.
Easily. Huge amount of
But
variety.
we are going to go ahead and jump into the entry.
Mm-hmm.
And guys, this could be really interesting for you, or it could really annoy you. Okay, werewolves, also known as lycanthropes or wolfmen, are mythological or folkloric humans with the ability to shapeshift into a wolf or similar creature, either purposefully or after being placed under a curse or an affliction. This transformation is also often associated with the phases of the moon.
Hmm.
Now, interesting thing, there is a real world illness, psychological illness, that people believe they turn into wolves.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I don't remember the exact name of it, but there are plenty of examples in history of men and women who go around acting like animals and who say they believe they have turned into a wolf or similar creature, I am not going to say one way or the other if any of the things we're talking about have any basis in reality, because I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But of all the creatures of folklore that I've come across, werewolves probably have the biggest possibility of having a actual medical explanation behind them.
Or at least something rooted in a medical reason, yes.
Mm-hmm. I was really hoping our buddy Crusader Nate would have joined in on this one, because he could probably have given a small dissertation on what medical lycanthropy is.
Mm.
It is interesting.
But there have been cases of individuals who have been in lockups all around the world who have started taking on actions and attitudes very animalistically.
Yeah.
And when they do that, they start doing things that humans ain't supposed to do. But
Now,
let's go ahead and go on.
Would this be the same thing? Like, because I've heard when there's a full moon out or some sort of like a moon cycle, it affects people in certain ways at night. I think it's
You're
a
talking
full
about
moon.
the concept of lunacy,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Would this be
where
similar?
it's theorized, and actually even something in modern pop culture, and even for medical personnel and law enforcement personnel, theorization that when the moon is full, that's when crimes and accidents start occurring more frequently.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, could it be a basis? Possibly. Do I think it likely is? Not really.
Yeah.
Now, watch, I say that, and next month, when the full moon comes around, you notice I'm not streaming because I might have gone complete Looney Tune. So we are not going to delve too deep into what may or may not be the case in this.
Well, I expect it was actually Evie just decided to finally off you.
Don't give her ideas. Okay, moving on. Characteristics. In addition to the natural characteristics inherent to both wolves and humans, werewolves are often attributed strength and speed far beyond those of wolves or men. The werewolf is generally held as a European character, although its lore has spread throughout the world in later times. Shapeshifters similar to werewolves are common in tales from all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to necessarily worry about the appearance because, honestly, in one way or one form, they're going to look like your average Joe six pack. In another way, they're going to look like an oversized dog.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Or if you catch them on a bad night, they'll look like something in between.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or maybe AOC if she hasn't got a shave recently. Oh, I'm sorry. Was that too soon?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, allegedly, one method of identifying a werewolf in its human form was to cut the flesh of the accused under the pretense that fur would be seen within the wound. After returning to their human forms, werewolves are usually documented as becoming weak, debilitated, and undergoing painful nervous depression. One universally reviled trait in medieval Europe was the werewolf's bad habit of devouring recently buried corpses. It is documented extensively, particularly in a book from the 19th century that appears to be written in Latin that I am not going to even try. There are a bunch of various local legends about werewolves. Fennoscandian werewolves were usually old women who possessed poison-coated claws and had the ability to paralyze cattle and children with their gaze.
Mm.
Isn't there something we talk about in this community on the regular that's kind of a similar theme?
Mm-hmm.
Something about a large vertical structure that individuals hit at high rates of speed. Just asking for a friend, of course.
Yeah. We don't have to get into that discussion though.
Serbian Volkodiaks traditionally had the habit of congregating annually in the winter months, when they would strip off their wolf skins and hang them from trees. They would then get a hold of another Volkodiak skin and burn it, releasing from its curse the Volkodiak from whom the skin came. Haiti has a werewolf variation called the Giroges, which typically try to trick mothers into giving away their children voluntarily by waking them at night and asking for their permission to take their child, to which the disoriented mother may either reply yes or no. According to Russian superstition, a werewolf can be recognized by bristles under the tongue. And according to some Swedish accounts, the werewolf could be distinguished from a regular wolf by the fact that it would run on 3 legs, stretching the 4th one backwards to look like a tail. That gives the whole thing about tripods a whole new meaning now, doesn't it?
Well, I would say those were very poorly hung individuals because all he had to do was trail behind that other appendage and they would have been fine. Sorry.
Okay. We're not going to necessarily go into the full details on this. You can read the article for yourself. I am going to hit some things that I think are really interesting for the curse or power aspect of whether or not this is a good or a bad thing. Apparently, in Italy, France, and Germany, it used to be said that a man or woman could turn into a werewolf if they slept on a certain Wednesday or Friday outside on a summer night with the full moon shining directly on their face. I hate to point this out, but that is practically every soldier who's ever served in the field.
Yeah.
In Brazil, it is believed that when a woman has 7 daughters and the 8th child is a man, that latter is likely to be a werewolf.
I was thinking he'd just be a milkman.
Becoming a werewolf by simply being bitten or scratched by another werewolf as a form of contagion is common in modern horror fiction, but it is rare in legend, unlike vampirism.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to touch on this one a little more detailed because I think you guys will find it amusing. There is a creepypasta series that has been narrated by a few different content creators. One of my personal favorites being a content creator who runs the channel Dr. Creepin's Vault. It's a relatively long series titled Werewolves Are A-Holes. It follows a man and a woman. Both of them are werewolves. One turned to the other. This is a minor spoiler, but at first I want you guys to guess which one turned the other. No, take a guess. Which one turned the other?
The woman turned the man.
Hey, you got it in one shot, Outlaw.
That's always
How'd you do it?
Call it a lucky guess.
How'd she cause him to turn into a werewolf?
Probably through the seduction of her sex appeal, or
You're on the right track, but you're missing just by a small amount. Apparently, when they engaged in coitus, it was unprotected, and he picked it up from her at that point.
Oh God!
So it was Vada.
Yep.
Dang.
See, that is one of those times where Pop would be like, "Riggs, what are you doing?" And Riggs would literally rip Pop's head off because he couldn't control it when he changed.
Or he'd be scratching his ears with his hind foot. Yeah.
Oh man.
Okay, from some of Pop's stories about that particular individual, are we sure he didn't do that anyway?
Well, that's a good possibility. Probably licked his own balls too, but anyway.
Mm.
Good call.
Oh
earned
man.
you earned that one. And sorry about the scratching there. My cat was deciding it was time to nibble on the microphone.
Yeah, I saw her getting up in
Oh.
your face.
Oh goodness.
I love my cat to death, but there are times that she just needs to learn that I don't need her in my face.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. We are not going to cover all of that. Werewolves and witchcraft. There are subcases where the transformation was accomplished by satanic allegiance for the most loathsome of ends, such as the sake of craving for human flesh.
Mm-hmm.
These could be sorcerers who have anointed their bodies with an ointment that they make by the instruct of the devil, and putting on certain enchanted girdle does not only undo the view of others. See, what the? That is very badly written. It's got to be in Old English.
It's written in an
Apparently, they've
old
done this
form.
girdle and they can use that to turn themselves into wolves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're not going to cover all of this because it'll go into details that none of us really want to talk about tonight.
Mhm.
Yeah, that one there, the curse of lycanthropy, is associated with demonic means. You're cursed,
Yep.
in other words. Yep. There's
Yep.
been a lot of that in the legends.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and cover a little bit on the remedies because that's something that's common in werewolf movies,
Mm-hmm.
specifically American Werewolf in London and ones of that ilk. Less common in ones like Twilight, where the only successful remedy is a silver bullet, preferably delivered at a long range.
Mm-hmm.
Various remedies have existed for removing the werewolf form. In antiquity, the ancient Greeks and Romans believed that the power of exhaustion in curing people of lycanthropy. The victim would be subjected to long periods of physical activity in the hopes of being purged of the malady. This practice stemmed from the fact that many alleged werewolves would be left feeling weak and debilitated after committing depredation.
Hmm.
In medieval Europe, there are 3 methods that one can use to cure a victim of werewolfism. I'm calling it lycanthropy, to hell with that other term. Medicinally, usually via the use of wolfsbane, surgically, or by exorcism. However, many of the cures advocated by the medieval medical practitioners proved fatal to the patient. A Sicilian belief of Arabic origin holds that a werewolf can be cured of its ailment by striking it 3 times on the forehead or scalp with a knife. Another belief from the same culture involves the piercing of the werewolf's hands with nails. Sometimes less extreme methods were used. In the German lowland of Schleswig-Holstein, I butchered that. I know I did. I actually
Schleswig-Holstein.
speak a little bit of German.
It's Schleswig-Holstein.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
A werewolf could be cured if one were to simply address it 3 times by its Christian name, while one Danish belief holds that simply scolding a werewolf will cure it.
So they're
Mhm.
saying that if you smack it on the nose with a newspaper, it's going to cure it?
Okay. Hang on 1 second. Hang on one second here. I'm going on camera for this because I have to point this out.
Oh.
How messed up would it be? You're a well-known dog trainer,
Mm.
and an individual comes in with a oversized wolfhound and tells you this dog is not controllable. In fact, every night it disappears. I can't find it, and when I see it in the morning, it is covered in blood and gore.
Oh God.
And you're that wolfhound, or you're that well-known trainer who decides I'm going to take this animal in. You smack it on the nose 3 times with a rolled-up newspaper, telling it no, bad, don't jump over the fence. And all of a
Don't eat
sudden,
my
where there's one
microphone.
wolfhound, there's now some 43-year-old middle-aged white dude laying there going, "Oh, thank you. I've been trying to get rid of that for years." How much of a mind job would that be?
That's just messed up. But yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Or if he just does that thing at him.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh. Oh.
When you look at certain folklore items, some of them are really cool.
Mhm.
Others are just like, what? What were you thinking when you came up with this idea? And if you were smoking something, could I have some of it?
Well, or at least let me stay clear of it because I know what it is now.
Yeah, that too. Okay, modern day depictions of werewolves. Werewolves are frequent subject of modern fiction in fantasy and horror genre. The idea is that werewolves are only vulnerable to silver bullets or other silver weapons, or that they can cause others to become werewolves by biting or wounding them, mainly derived from 20th century works of fiction. Below are listed pieces of literature that revolve around or contain a werewolf, even for a moment. I'm not going to go and read the full descriptions. I'm just going to tell you the year and the title, assuming I can pronounce it. 1857, Le Meneur de Luce, The Wolf Leader. 1933, The Werewolf of Paris. 1948, Darker Than You Think. 1961, Three Hearts and Three Lions. 1972, Yarg R.N. Far's I'm a Werewolf Cub. A children's novel written by Gunnel Linde and was published. It was translated to English. 1977, The Howling. Followed by The Howling 2.
Mm-hmm.
Followed again by The Howling 3. 1979, The Black Wolf. 1980, A Walk in Wolf Wood. 1983, Cycle of the Werewolf. 1986, Dark Cry of the Moon. 1989, The Wolf's Hour. 1991, The Wild. 1993, The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. 96, The Lunatic Cafe.
Erotic mystery horror series.
Yeah,
Wow.
I literally just looked at that. What fornication? Okay.
Does that
97.
count as bestiality?
Let's finish the article and then we're going to jump into that because
I was just asking for a friend.
Drop on you guys. 1997, Blood and Chocolate, a paranormal romance.
Oh my god.
God, another one.
1999, The Fifth Elephant.
Okay, that's
1999,
Discworld, so
Harry
that's why that
Potter
one.
and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Big shock.
Uh,
2000, The Windham Werewolves. 2001, Bitten. 2001 again, Full Moon, the second novel of the Dresden Files. 2004, The Scared Book of the Werewolf. 2007, Sharp Teeth. 2009, Frostbitten. Also 2009, Skin Trade. Again from the same series about a vampire hunter.
Right.
2012, Dust of the Damned. Also 2012, The Wolf Gift. Followed by The Wolves of Midwinter in 2013.
Well, that's Anne Rice. Those are all weird.
Yeah, I'm just wondering when she branched out from vampires to werewolves.
Shortly after she petered out the vampiric novels and before she embraced Christianity. Anyway.
No. The Wolves of Mercy Falls series.
That's kind of an oxymoron, isn't it?
Well, okay. Apparently with this one, they transform into humans during summer because instead of the full moon, the cause of the transformation is the cold.
Mm-hmm.
All right, films and TV. 81, An American Werewolf in London.
Mm-hmm.
Also in 81, The Howling,
Yep.
probably all three of them. 2000, Ginger Snaps.
Hmm.
Yeah, I never
Not good.
saw that one.
Not
I
good.
know the name, but I
I'm
didn't know
not
that
gonna-
was about werewolves.
Yeah, I'm not going to touch that one. I'm not, because I've seen that movie, and if I remember it, she was a redhead.
Sure she was.
No.
And the drapes matched. Yeah, whatever.
In 04, Harry Potter, Prisoner of Azkaban. 07, Prank Patrol, Season 2,
Mm-hmm.
episode, 2011, Teen Wolf. Zombies 2, a Disney musical. Supernatural, episode 17, Heart.
Did you say stupid natural?
Supernatural.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, werewolves are shown heavily in the Underworld franchise, which I'm surprised wasn't listed more prevalently, because that's actually one of the better depictions of them, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
2020, a Netflix series called The Order. They're also in a bunch of video games. We're not going to touch on this because, quite frankly, there's too damn many.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I am going to kill this article because, honestly, I don't think we want to continue going there just yet. So, okay. I'm going to give a weird hypothetical, and because this is a quasi red pill, or at the very least red pill adjacent channel, we are going to ask the question that all red pill guys probably have at this point. If you date a werewolf, are you a furry?
Oh, boy.
I thought you were going to ask
And chat,
questions about your hairy mother-in-law.
Oh,
and
wow.
chat, I want you to get involved in this. If you have an answer to that question, please throw it up there.
Oh, boy.
Because here's my thought process on this. It's not much different than if you're dating a transformer.
That was,
Well, no, think about it. You're out at the club or at a bar, or you're doing something with your buddies, and you see this hot chick. Yeah, her hair's a little browner than you might really like under normal circumstances. Her nose might be a smidge long, and she might have this unnecessary habit of wanting to scratch behind her ears when she's asked questions that make her think.
With her
But
hind
otherwise,
leg.
you get along with her fairly well. And and things start getting serious, and she goes, "Oh, I need to tell you something. Once a month, I turn into a psychotic, evil witch." Most of us would be like, "Yeah, we know. You get your period." No,
Mine
it's
would
worse than the
be only
period. It's
once a
tied to the
month.
moon.
yeah. Oh, man.
That's a good one from St. Louis Arch.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I've actually
Yeah.
heard about that one, St. Louis Arch. I've never actually read it myself.
Splody things.
So, but
You gotta
guys, if
you
you
gotta
were
watch out for them.
actively dating, if you were actively dating and you found out that the girl you're hooking up with once a month turns into an oversized hellhound, how would you react?
Well, I would hope that I hadn't
Because I know
actually
my problem.
dated
I'm
her
not a
yet.
dog person.
I would hope that I hadn't actually dated her yet, and I would distance myself.
But that would be one heck of an uncomfortable situation, especially if you were taking her out camping on the month or at the time of the month when she was having her issue.
Oh, boy.
Well, and that's a reflection upon her too, because she didn't tell you no, not this week, next week.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at with the Transformer comment.
Strangely enough, there is actually a cartoon that explores this very situation. Remember the cartoon Johnny Bravo?
Yeah. I
Vaguely.
don't think I ever watched it, but yeah.
There's an episode where he dates a chick that he thought was normal, and she turns out to be a werewolf that transforms when a full moon's out at night. Yeah. Needless to say, you can pretty much guess the rest. I mean,
hmm
throws him around, hurts
Mayhem,
him.
chaos, bloodshed, and lots of screaming.
Yeah.
And then she transforms.
Yeah. Yep. Although she doesn't get any bigger, she just turns into a werewolf. A normal woman-sized werewolf.
She doesn't grow in stature, in other words.
Yeah, she just turns into a normal human-sized werewolf.
So she turns into a big doggo.
Pretty much, yeah. A big furry, basically, yeah.
Although if she could control her anger management issues, that'd be a good time to take her out to a Comic-Con. She wouldn't even have to have a costume.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But they're so annoying at Comic Cons that there's going to be dead bodies.
Yeah.
And remember the heightened sense of smell.
Okay, I have to ask this question.
Mm-hmm.
A werewolf hunting furries at Comic-Con. How is this a bad thing?
That would be a hell of a movie.
That'd make for one hell of a good comedy right there.
Oh, fuck yeah. What's that company that used to advertise with Pop all the time?
Not So Sane Entertainment.
Yes, they need to do it.
Are they actually still making movies?
I don't know. We should look into it, though.
Oh, if I had any kind of cinematic skill and the equipment, I would definitely be looking into doing a write-up for that.
You know what? This is the captain's opus.
Oh,
And make it happen at a wedding.
Actually, you know what would be even funnier? Pop wants to do his Mantastic Moments thing where he gets a bunch of guys together.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Have it at or have the movie set during an event like that.
God.
Hmm.
And the next venue over is a furry convention. Oh my God.
Exactly.
You're a sick son of a bitch.
Hang on, even worse, because this is what would actually happen. The convention center has 2 big rooms. One of them's being used by Pop for his Mantastic Moments.
Mm-hmm.
The other one's a feminist convention.
Ugh.
Oh God.
Well, those are all definitely werewolves. Have you seen those hairy bitches? Jesus.
Oh my God, man.
But
Stinky hairy bitches.
would that not be a horror comedy gold movie right there?
But you got to throw in bronies at that point, man. Come
Oh God, not bronies. No. Anything but those.
Okay, I'm not going to touch that. I'm leaving that one
I
alone.
don't either, man. Duh.
Okay, guys. So we have been on for just over an hour.
Okay.
I'm going to drop everyone into the backstage. I don't have a break per se anymore, gentlemen, because last couple of times I've used it, YouTube's told me that it's a copyright issue, so I'm not going to play that game. I'm going to give you guys, I'll give it 5 minutes of a hiatus. Go refill your drinks, empty your squirrel bladders, check to make sure that you don't have a werewolf under your truck. And we will be back here in a few minutes. I'm going to drop everyone into the backstage. And in about 5, we'll kick back on. Okay, I know that wasn't quite 5 minutes, guys, but honestly, without something there, it's just dead air, and I don't think anyone wants to sit there and listen to dead air.
Hmm.
So, ready to jump into the last article for the evening, gentlemen? At least
Do
last
it.
primary, and then we might hit a few of the other ones.
To do it.
Tommy, if you're saying anything, I'm not hearing you.
That's because I was muted, but yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so give me just 1 second. All right, guys, our final particular movie monster entity for the night. Ironically enough, it's probably the one that's been given the most airtime by Hollywood.
Mhm.
What in the world? I'm gonna have to fix that. All right. But of all the classic monster movie monsters, the one who everyone seems to love using is the vampire.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And they've probably got more, I'm going to go ahead and use the word YouTube, get over it, misinformation and disinformation about them than any other creature from folklore in the world. There are so many, now there are so many myths about vampire. What on earth? Okay, I'm going to have to do this a different way. There are so many different myths and legends about vampires that are legit that
Mm-hmm.
you could literally go and make a movie using each and every one of them for the next 50 years and still never run out of material.
Mhm. I would agree with that statement.
Yeah.
Say that again.
I said I would agree with that statement.
The problem is what they do with vampires nowadays, it falls into one of two categories. If they're female, they turn them into 304s.
Mhm.
If they're
Mhm.
males, they turn them into your stereotypical alpha Chad bad boys. And when you look at the actual mythology behind them, that ain't what they're supposed to be.
Mhm.
What on earth? Okay, there we go. All right, making sure that that's actually showing. Okay. So, vampires are creatures from folklore that subsist by feeding on the vital essence, generally in the form of blood, of the living. In European folklore, which is the most commonly used by Hollywood,
Mhm.
vampires are undead creatures that often visit loved ones and cause mischief or deaths in the neighborhoods they inhabited while they were alive. They would wear shrouds and were often described as bloated and of ruddy or dark countenance, markedly different than today's gaunt, pale vampire, which dates from the early 19th century. Vampiric entities, I bounced that too far down, have been recorded in most cultures. The term vampire was popularized in Western Europe after reports of an 18th century mass hysteria of a pre existing folk belief in the Balkans and Eastern Europe that's in some cases resulted in corpses being staked and people being accused of vampirism.
Mhm.
Local variants in Eastern Europe were also known by different names, such as the Shriga in Albania, Verkerlikas in Greece, and the Strigoi in Romania. In modern times, the vampire is generally held to be a fictitious entity, although the belief in similar vampiric creatures, such as the chupacabra, still persists in some cultures.
Mhm.
Early folk belief Early folk belief in vampires has sometimes been ascribed to the ignorance of the body's processes of decomposition after death, and how people in pre industrial societies tried to rationalize this, creating the figure of the vampire to explain the mysteries of death. Porphyria was linked with legends of vampirism in 1985 and received much media exposure, but has since been largely discredited. In case anyone's interested, porphyria is the mental and physical illness where people believe they actually have to ingest blood to survive.
Mm.
The charismatic and sophisticated vampires of modern fiction was born in 1819 with the publication of The Vampire by English writer Jean Polidori. The story was highly successful and arguably the most influential vampire work of the early 19th century. Bram Stoker's 1897 Dracula is remembered as the quintessential vampire novel and provided the basis of the modern vampire legend, even though it was published after Joseph Sheridan Le Fano's 1872 novel Carmilla. The success of this book spawned a distinctive vampire genre, still popular in the 21st century with books, films, television shows, and video games. The vampire has since become a dominant figure in the horror genre.
Mm-hmm.
Before we continue on, gentlemen, I want to ask you all a question.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to movies and TV shows pertaining to vampires that you have seen, what is your personal favorite?
Let's see.
Well, I have no absolute overreaching personal favorite. I mentioned The Lost Boys for cinema earlier.
That's a good one.
That's a good one for cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I always enjoyed Buffy the Vampire Slayer, in all honesty. Even if it was total fucking woke bullshit before woke was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Vampire Slayer or Vampire Layer? Because wasn't it one of these things
Well,
where half the series she was basically doing the vampire she had to slay?
there was that too. Yeah.
St. Louis Arch. You hang on one second, Outlaw. I do want to address this. St. Louis Arch, you are correct
Mm-hmm.
and slightly off the mark on that. You refer to him as Prince Dracul. Dracul was a title
Mm-hmm.
as much as it was a name.
Yep.
Vladimir
The
Dracul
order.
Fontepesh was the son of a Romanian Wallachian warlord who was a member of the Order of the Drakon or the Order of the Devil, depending on the translation.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where the Dracul part of his name comes from. Vlad the Impaler, as he's more colloquially known, is the individual that you're referencing there. And
Mm-hmm.
his family was all sorts of messed up. Again, we could do a whole
royalty.
stream on just that particular family group. But he had a sister that actually believed that bathing in the blood of young women would allow her to keep her youth and vitality for longer.
Now, I don't know that that's accurate, though, that they were actually related. They were about the same time period, yes.
Yeah. Like I said, we could do a whole stream on this particular item
Mm-hmm.
and this particular family. His brother was actually even worse. And Vladimir Dracul was known to be a very, I'm going to just go ahead and say it, bloodthirsty individual.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the tortures and punishments that he is infamous for implementing was actually used against individuals who invaded his lands.
Right.
He was actually seen by the people who lived in his territories as a very fair and just ruler for the time period. Don't get me wrong, for the time period, he was still brutal as all get out, but
might makes right at that time for sure.
Say again?
I said might makes right at that time for sure.
Exactly. But Outlaw, you had a favorite one to add to that?
Well, it's going to be more, I guess, discreet unless you've watched the show Supernatural. They've done takes on vampires. You
I
know,
haven't watched a lot of that show, but I've heard a lot about it.
they didn't go overboard with the whole blood sucking thing and all that. They tried to do like a more realistic spin on it, like people who couldn't understand why they were so thirsty for blood. I get that's what I got out of it anyway.
Mm.
They just were what they were, and but they did wonder like why they were this way. And I guess you'd say like a more sentient, self-aware type Dracula stereotype, I guess.
Mm.
Okay. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. My personal favorite vampire movie that I've actually watched, and I've watched this several times, technically could be classified as not being a vampire movie. Could also be considered a spoof. But Van Helsing,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
the
which take on
portrayal
Van
of
Helsing
Dracula,
too?
and say again.
I said which take on Van Helsing also, because there's many ones.
I'm talking about the one that the guy who's played Wolverine
Oh, yeah, the
played
one
Van
with
Helsing.
Kate Beckinsale.
Yes.
In fact, I think I've
In
got
my
a copy
opinion,
of
the
that.
depiction of Dracula in that movie was one of the best depictions of the character that they could have done.
Mm.
Because he was sinister, he was evil, but when he needed to be, he was also suave and cultured.
Mm-hmm.
You never knew from one scene to the next if he was going to kill everyone in the room or sit down and have a good, honest conversation with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally love that take on the character.
And you could go the complete 180-degree opposite when you talk about the anime Van Helsing.
Yeah.
Oh, God, let's not.
No, actually, I really enjoyed that series. I thought it was so stupid, especially the overdubs. What do they call them? The ones where they spoof the shit out of it. Those are hilarious.
All right, my ex made me actually sit down and watch the first 2 seasons of the Netflix Castlevania series.
Oh, I haven't heard anything good
And
about that one.
oh my gosh. I used to love the Castlevania video games.
Mm-hmm.
After watching that, I cannot sit down and look at any one of them. I don't even have to turn the thing on and I'm already having flashbacks. That series was just absolute trash.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. The Van Helsing I'm speaking of is completely different.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next section on this. There is going to be a lot here. So we're not going to touch on everything. But let's go ahead and jump into this. Myths and legends. Appearance. Now, this is traditional European vampires.
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of that. If I can, what the heck? Oh, how do I get rid of this?
There you go.
How do I
It's
get
gone.
rid of this?
Oh, that one.
No, forget it.
The X is
I'll
there. I
probably
can
get a
see
ding
it.
for that on YouTube, but I don't care.
Well, don't
I only
play
do
it. You
streams
should
every
be
2
fine.
weeks anyway, so it isn't really a huge issue. Okay. Myth and legend. Appearance. They wore shrouds and were often described as bloated or ruddy of dark countenance. Powers and abilities. Vampires are often considered powerful undead in stories and folklore due to their wide variety of abilities and their near indestructibility. They tend to be extremely difficult to kill. Creation of a vampire. And this is going to vary from region to region.
Mm-hmm.
In Slavic and in Chinese traditions, any corpse that was jumped over by an animal, particularly a dog or a cat, was feared to become one of the undead. A body with a wound that had not been treated with boiling water was also at risk. In Russian folklore, vampires were said to have once been witches or people who had rebelled against the Russian Orthodox Church while they were alive and had come back due to dark magic.
And that
In
convenient.
recent lore, vampires are created when a vampire bites and or gives a human their blood, which turns them into a subordinate vampire, sometimes known as a thrall.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I am going to touch on this real quick because this is one of those things that irritates the living daylights out of me. I love vampire stories. When it comes to anything folkloric, if it has something to do with vampires, I probably have either read it or looked at it or have heard about it and it's on my reading list. The thing about the blood kiss or the vampire's kiss or whatever variation you want to call it by is one of those things that, depending on how they use it, is either a really good storytelling technique or an absolute cluster fornication of near biblical proportions.
Mm.
When they talk about a vampire turning somebody into a thrall by drinking their blood, Tommy, hypothetically, Outlaw and you are visiting, let's say Sean up in Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
And we had no idea that Sean was a creature of the night.
Mm.
And he offers you guys some red wine. You're like, okay, we're having some steak for dinner. It goes with it. Sure, why not? He doesn't tell you that that red wine is mixed with a little bit of vitae from him.
Mm-hmm.
You two drink it, and that next thing you know, you are both vampire thralls because Sean St. George didn't bother telling you that, oh, by the way, I've not been human for the last 250 years.
Oh, well.
That
Thanks,
is
Sean.
that is the making of a modern day vampire thrall.
Yes.
Now, in some movies, they treat that really, really good. Have you watched Blade with Denzel Washington?
Yeah.
No, that's not Denzel Washington. That's
Say that again.
so that's not Denzel Washington. That's
Harrison Ford.
Oh, my bad.
No. The guy that got in trouble for
No,
dodging
it's
the
a black
IRS.
guy.
Yep. God damn it, I cannot remember his name at the moment.
But either way,
Right.
the Marvel Blade vampires are an example of a vampire being or creating thralls in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Wesley Snipes, thank you very much, Slick
Wesley
South.
Snipes. There we go.
That is how, by folklore and good vampire stories, they create their thralls. The so-called blood kiss is when they drain your blood almost completely to the point where you're just on the edge of dying.
Mm-hmm.
Then they open their own wrist and make you drink some of their blood.
Mm-hmm.
That's what turns you into a vampire in some of the vampire movies that are out there.
Right.
In the classic movies, they actually would, like Dracula with Bela Lugosi, they wouldn't feed you their blood. They would drain you to the point where you were nearly exsanguinated. And then there would be some kind of ritualistic thingamabob they would do, and you would become a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it depended on how powerful the sire was to turn you into a vampire yourself with your own free will, or if you were basically a vampire Borg.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to touch on that one because that is
Well,
one
and
of
there's
those
also
things that really annoys me with a lot of the vampire movies that are out there.
there's also the folklore one where if they feed on you 3 times, you become a vampire.
Exactly, and that's the way that Bela Lugosi's Dracula worked, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they fed on you 3 times, you would become one.
Or at the very least, you'd become a thrall to them.
Right.
Okay, preventing vampirism. Certain practices were soon put into place to keep the dead from rising again as undead. Such practices included burying a corpse upside down,
Mm-hmm.
placing agricultural objects by the grave to appease the spirit itself or potential demons, severing the tendons at the knees or spiking the head, body, or clothes to the ground to keep them from rising.
Mm-hmm.
The Roma would drive a steel or iron needle into a corpse's heart and place bits of steel in the mouth, over the eyes and ears, and between the fingers at the time of burial. They also placed hawthorn in the corpse's sock or drove a hawthorn stake through the legs. Scattering small grains such as rice, poppy seeds, millet, or sand on the ground near the grave, which would keep the vampire occupied counting the grains all night in European and Chinese lore.
Mm-hmm.
Placing a wax crust and a piece of pottery with the inscription Jesus Christ Conquers on the corpse. Further measures included pouring boiling water over the grave for complete incineration of the body,
Mm-hmm.
placing something including a lemon, garlic, or even a brick in the mouth of the corpse suspected to be a vampire,
Mm-hmm.
shooting a bullet through the coffin. That's Romanian. And for resistant cases, the body was dismembered and the pieces burned, mixed with water, and administered to the family members as a cure. In Bulgaria, over 100 skeletons with metal objects such as plow bits embedded through the torso have been discovered. Okay, some common folkloric defenses from vampires. All right, I'm going to say this. It depends on the folklore you're talking about, because with some of these, it is seen as BS.
Mm-hmm.
You've got garlic, wild rose, hawthorn plants. Sprinkling mustard seeds on the roof of a house was said to keep them away. This also may relate to counting of fine grains used in preventative measures mentioned earlier. Sacred items such as a crucifix, rosary, or holy water. Modern fiction has expanded on the concept to include any religious symbol wielded by a sincere believer of the relevant religion. For example, a believing Jew could use the Star of David to ward off a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
Mirrors faced outwards on a door, as in some cultures, they do not have a reflection and cannot cast a shadow. Mirrors were made with silver in old days, which was considered a pure metal and commonly used in monster defense.
Mm-hmm.
Vampires are said to be unable to walk on consecrated ground such as that of a church or temple, or cross running water. Some traditions also hold that vampires cannot enter a house unless invited by the owner, although after the first invitation they can come and go as they please. Okay, gents, you've got more experience with relationships than I do. Is that kind of similar with some of your exes?
Yeah, but you could get them to stop showing up. I found that out.
No, I mean where they cannot enter until you've invited them in.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
Now,
then I've stopped them from coming and going as they please, though.
now I will also say this much. I do have a little bit of an idea why that particular thing is such a prevalent thing in vampire lore. And you might find this interesting. The idea is you have to invite evil into your home.
Mm-hmm.
And vampires are seen as nothing but evil.
Right.
Despite modern folklore and movies often showing them as being misunderstood, good guys, or even anti-heroes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's just something I figured you guys might find to be relatively interesting or amusing.
Well, modern takes are going to take all kinds of license with it. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
you look at here's the case in point. You look at Buffy. We've mentioned it before. Angel, the vampire, was
Uh-huh.
cursed by a gypsy and given
Yep.
his soul back by that gypsy. And if he fell in love with someone, he would lose his soul again. That was one of the tropes in the series. But he was always a vampire.
St. Louis Arch.
St.
You
Louis
have my
Arch.
sympathies there.
I think I would have just done it.
I am starring that one. That's probably that particular comment might have won the night.
Don't think it'd work with a
Okay, we're
vampire,
gonna
but
jump
an
back
ex,
into
yes.
the article. I don't think we're gonna go over this entire thing because this is a long article. Destroying vampires. I'm not going to read each and every item. I'm just going to give the name and where it comes from. Decapitation, according to the Germans and Western Slavic countries. Often the head would be buried between the feet in these areas, or occasionally behind the buttocks or away from the body. How badly would people have to dislike you to want to cut your head off and stick it where you're essentially eating your own fourth point of contact for all of eternity when you die?
I'd say you were a foul individual.
I mean, that is, I don't even want to guess on that one. How bad. That's, wow. Now, saying that, I would happily see that happen to most of Congress.
Well, those are vampires, though. Those are liches. Different story.
Potato, potato. In the Balkans, a vampire could also be killed by being shot or drowned, by repeating the funeral service, or by sprinkling holy water on the body, or by exorcism, which makes sense if the vampire is seen as being inhabited by a demonic spirit.
Right.
There's a lot of different variations between regions. I'm not going to go over all of them because there's a bunch of them. The ancient Greeks and Romans had a couple of different ones, such as the Empusae and the Lamia, which were serpent-like creatures, as well as the Strix. A lot of the European mythology of vampires originated during the medieval era. Shouldn't be a surprise there.
Part of that plays into the rise of physiology, where they were actually dissecting corpses to figure out how the body worked.
Okay, we are going to go ahead and jump into the non-European vampire traditions, and these are some interesting ones. In Africa, the Ashanti people tell of an iron-toothed and tree-drilling vampire. Then there's the Yui people that have the Adzi that can take the form of a firefly and hunts children. And Pandulu from Eastern Cape region can take the form of a large taloned bird and can summon thunder and lightning. Ramagana is from Madagascar. Tell of this outlaw living vampire who drinks blood and eats the nail clippings of nobles.
Hmm.
Hang on. Let me just ask this question.
Mm-hmm.
Don't we currently call those simps?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you could. Yes.
Because isn't that what Amaranth's fanboys basically do?
They eat more than their nails.
I'm talking about drinking the bathwater here.
Oh, well, eat the peanuts out of her shit, all that good stuff.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Wow.
You went there, buddy. It's your
Oh, I know I
fault.
went there.
Oh goodness.
That doesn't mean I regret it any less. Okay, here in the Americas, there is the Rougarou, or the Lougarou, a blood-sucking werewolf of a mixture of French and American voodoo or voodoo, a similar female monster called the Salkudant, or the of Trinidad, and the Tunda of Pizzola of Colombian folklore. Tommy, you might actually be able to have somebody tell you about that one.
Yeah, I'll have to ask Diana about that one. That's not one I'm familiar with.
The Puchin, a blood-sucking snake of the Mapuche of southern Chile. Apparently, aloe vera hung backwards behind or near a door was thought to ward off vampiric beings in South American superstition. Tillich, Aztec mythology described tales of these Skeletor-faced spirits who died in childbirth and who stole children and entered into sexual liaisons with the living, driving them mad. Sounds a lot like the succubus.
Succubus or an incubus, yeah.
In Asia, there's a lot of other vampire lore. The Managani, I probably butchered that, a type of vampire from the Philippines that can detach its upper half. Jiangxi, a jumpy, blood-sucking undead from China.
Sounds like a fucking mosquito.
The Buta, or the Pret, is the soul of a man who died an untimely death. It wanders around animating dead bodies at night, attacking the living, much like a ghoul. In northern India, there is the... Whoa.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Skipping that name, a vampire-like creature with a head encircled by intestines and a skull from which it drank blood. The figure of the Vitala, who appears in South Asian legend and story, may sometimes be rendered as vampire. See section on ancient beliefs above. We're not going backwards. Some vampires have appeared in Japanese cinema since the 1950s, and the folklore is Western in origin. However, they have something called the
Nukakubi,
which is a being whose head and neck detach from its body to fly about seeking human prey at night. There's also the Kitsune, who are spiritual vampires that feed on life force and use magic. As such, they acquire it from making love with humans.
Another succubi.
So, guys, for future reference, that foxy lady you pick up at the club may or may not be a nine-tailed fox in real life. If you think she's sucking your soul out when she's doing certain other things, she very well may be. Just saying, for your future reference.
The nine-tailed fox.
The more you know here. Where is it? The Malaysian Penggalan may either be a beautiful old or young woman who obtained her beauty through the active use of black magic or other unnatural means, and is most commonly described in local folklore to be dark or demonic in nature. She can detach her fanged head, which flies around the night looking for blood, typically from pregnant women. Malaysians would hang thistles around the doors and windows of houses, hoping that this creature would not enter for fear of catching the intestines on the thorns. There's a similar creature called the Laylak in Balinese folklore. Basically, there's more of these things than we can probably talk about in a 2-hour stream. We're not going to talk about famous suspected vampires. We're also not going to delve too deep into the modern depictions because we've already beat that to death.
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay, there's also Romanian and Slavic variations on this. We can go into that, or we can leave it be. I vote leave it be for now.
I do.
Yeah.
Also,
Me too.
Okay, since we do still have some time in the show, about 15 minutes, do we want to go ahead and jump over to take a look at some of the other mythologies that are out there and see if there's anything that jumps out as being interesting to all of us, or do we want to go ahead and call it a night, gentlemen?
well, you'd mentioned the chupacabra. I think we ought to touch on why that's different than a vampire,
Okay, let
Mhm.
me
but still has
let me
very
pull up
similar
Google real quick. I'm
attributes.
gonna stop sharing my current
Very true.
screen.
Yeah.
Tommy,
Hmm.
you have some friends that are from a region that actually are familiar with the chupacabra. If you want to talk about that a little bit while I call up the data.
Well, what my understanding, coming from a background with Mexican and Central American migrant workers, the chupacabra is a goat sucker. Literally steals the milk from the family cow or goats. It translates as goat sucker and
Mhm.
slowly bleeds the family and starves them to death because it is stealing the milk. That is my understanding under the Mexican, shall we say, mythos.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I know about them as well.
Me
Hmm.
too. Yeah.
Where is it? I know we talked about it a little bit on the cryptid stream 2 weeks ago. But let's see if I can find some chupacabra mythology here.
Mm.
That's not on Wikipedia and thus wouldn't get me copyrighted.
I don't know how anybody could claim a copyright on a Wikipedia article.
Now, like I said, I've had so many weird copyright things
Well,
come
no,
up
I
that
understand that, but what I'm saying is I don't understand how that could ever be a claim that was valid.
Okay,
This is an
so
open
gentlemen, if you want
world
to look this up at a later
encyclopedia.
time, what I'm about to share with you comes from mythology.net.
Okay.
Mhm.
Come on. There we go. Okay, chupacabras. You wake up in the morning and call your dog to come in and eat. He usually comes quickly, but for some reason he isn't coming today. You wander outside and walk around the corner of your house to see him laying on the ground. Worried, you run up to your beloved pet and examine his neck. The three telltale holes can be plainly seen. A pang of guilt wells up inside you as you drop your head in regret. If you had only brought your dog in for the night, he might not have fallen prey to the chupacabra. What is a chupacabra? The chupacabra is a cryptid creature that was brought to the attention of the public in the mid 1990s. The origin of the creature remains a mystery, although there are certainly many theories that have arisen since the first modern day sightings. Despite all these efforts, the chupacabra still remains a mystery that disappeared almost as suddenly as it came, except in internet conspiracy forums and folklore from the region that originated it.
Well, and the fact that mange is a real thing and so are coyotes. But anyway.
Yeah, interestingly enough, the chupacabra is known to have multiple depictions regarding its appearance. These descriptions tend to vary depending on the location and time period, but they almost include a description of a scaly or spiked skin. Other than these criteria, the rest of the story can be fairly varied. Some chupacabra have been depicted as being bipedal. Other creatures were said to, oh, good grief. Other creatures were said to have a closer resemblance to dogs and other canines, with a bad case of mange.
Mhm.
Some sources even described the creatures as being similar to a monkey. It is speculated that the majority of the variance in description of the creature is because of fear and confusion from the eyewitnesses. Another fascinating feature of the chupacabra story is that the creature is said to have a bite that leaves 3 small puncture marks instead of the expected 2 puncture pattern that most predators leave behind. This leads most people to believe that a chupacabra is a unique threat that has not been classified under any of the existing animal species in today's world. Others are skeptic and believe there to be a more scientific explanations to the mysterious deaths of the animals and livestock. I'm not going to go over to how
Yeah.
it emerged in modern day because most of us are familiar with it. Uh, yeah, talks about the eyewitness report. We're not going to worry about the sightings. We're not going to. All right, I'm just going to close this out. The long and the short of it is, it's not that the chupacabra story was because somebody observed some coyotes and similar canines with extreme cases of mange at around the same time that goats and other livestock were being brutally mauled, mutilated, and drained of all their blood.
Mm-hmm.
I personally suspect that given the fact that these things popped up in '99, and that's about the time when a lot of the internet was becoming popular and a lot of different urban legends were floating around. And everyone wanted a tourist trap in their hometown to draw people in to spend money. But the chupacabra was just a southeast or southwest American and northern Mexico thing that they came up with, created a mythology around it, and were like, okay, we have this weird monster thing that you might be able to see if you come up this way for a
Mhm.
visit. And in probably some less reputable areas, they more than likely have something similar to Barnum and Bailey's Circus, where for $5.99 you can get your photo taken with the stuffed carcass of the chupacabra killed by insert name here on insert date here.
Yeah, their version of Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Exactly. But gentlemen, we have been going for right around or just under 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you have any other monsters from Halloween movies that you'd like to talk about this evening? Or do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to touch on?
Well, I've always been partial to a good ghost story,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always found it fascinating when you have like a ghostly phenomenon possess inanimate objects.
Like
Poltergeist.
poltergeists, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are always some fun stories, and we might see about looking up some of those to take apart at a later date.
Heck yeah.
Well, I see
Tony,
a
do you have anything
succubus
you'd
on
like
the
to finish
screen
out
right
with?
now, honestly.
Say again?
I said
Wait,
I
what?
see a succubus on the screen right now.
Where?
It's kind of a furry one, sitting there sleeping away.
Yeah, she's been having a rough go the last few weeks.
Oh.
Yes. Hey, Evie, say hi to everybody.
Hello, Evie, you evil succubus girl.
Yeah, she's feeling kind of antisocial.
Nah, she's not
Yeah,
running away.
she's
That's
not
not
happy
that.
being under all the hot lights here. So
That doesn't help.
okay, so if you guys have no further comments or statements, I'm gonna go ahead and just wish everyone a happy, safe Halloween and call it for the evening.
Let's do it.
Heck yeah, man.
No idea what the next show is going to be. Could be relationship related. Could be another BS section with a bunch of vets because it is going to be November.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know yet. Watch and learn. Could be something funny. Could be something terrible. See you
Could
all
be
later.
both. Take care.